Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. I'm Patrick here with Steve. As always, we last session we finished buds. We graduated. Today we're going to kick it up a notch. We're going to get into Ranger training now. So this is for all the marbles. This is big boy training. Um, I think, and one quick note, um, these discussions, our goal is to get um, uh, to matters covering, physical, mental, spiritual stressors, ethical, moral conundrums, and along the way we'll touch on those. But we think it's important to talk about our background as well to give context. So, um, for those who might wonder when we're going to get to that, we'll get to it along the way. So, so talking about ranger training and ranger training, we talked about buds and buds is a very it has the reputation. Everybody knows about buds, and everyone who tracks that kind of stuff is more or less understands that the set pieces are involved with it. I think ranger training um, is definitely one of those things that people don't quite understand or very confused about. What part of the training gets you into the 75th Ranger Regiment, and what part gets you the Ranger tab? And oh wait,
Mhm.
aren't those the same thing? And aren't all of you Rangers? And so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to start off with is for me to attempt to try to explain how it all relates and it all connects. So, um, so on paper, um, the selection course to get into the 75th Ranger Regiment, the active special operations unit, um, at my time was 4 weeks. Prior to that, it was 3 weeks. Prior to the global war on terror, and it is currently an 8 week program, I believe. So at the time I went through, is called RIP, uh, uh, Ranger Indoctrination Program, and now today it's called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, and it breaks down actually into RASP 1 and 2, which is another part I think that makes the Ranger Regiment or Ranger selection interesting. So at my time, the process was eh, so that's on paper what it takes to become a ranger. I think if I were to say what it really takes to become a fully qualified ranger who has more or less hit all the wickets to feel comfortable in what they're doing and what their place is within special operations, I think it's more than that. Um, all the other units have these very well defined, and in some ways I'm jealous about how well defined the selection and training programs are to become a SEAL, right? So nowadays, SEAL, they have prep courses that feed you into
Mhm.
to smaller prep courses that feed you
Yeah.
into buds that then feeds into, now my understanding is SQT, which then gets you another milestone, and then you get to your unit. And I hear the same thing, and Green Beret selection is very much the same, right? The infamous, you got SFAS, the selection process, going into the Q course, the infamous Q
What's that?
course, and all the schools and training that are lined up there, and then you get fed into the unit, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, and this is not something I've talked to other folks about, so this is purely my opinion. Um, I think you can get confused thinking, oh, so it takes, at my time, it took 4 weeks and then boom, you were a ranger. That's all it
Yeah.
took.
Yeah, yeah.
But in reality, I think it's the entire initial process that gets you to the point where you are a team leader, is the point at which you've actually hit all those wickets and you've completed the training and the assessment. Again, in my opinion.
Right.
So
But just
go
to
ahead.
insert, you were all before you even set foot in RIP, you are a combat infantryman and you are airborne qualified.
Yep, that's
So
correct.
that's quite a bit right there. I mean, okay. So go for it.
Yeah, yeah. So you've done again, at my time, and that's what'll make it confusing is what it was like at my time versus what it is now. And actually it changes a lot. It's changed a lot while
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
while the Ranger Regiment tries to figure out what's the right mix. What is that? What does that pipeline look like? So
Yes.
at my time, it was you graduate from infantry one station unit training, which is a combination of basic training and AIT. For most other Army MOSs, AIT is usually like they usually back off a little bit. Like after boot camp, the initial 6 weeks, I think, like you're considered a soldier. So they relax a little bit and they try to teach you your trade. So if you're an intel analyst or you're a food services person, a water purification specialist. At AIT, the model is more about training you than breaking you down and building you back up. I found at the time I went to infantry one station unit training, it was just basically 14 weeks of basic training. So so
Yeah.
I mean that's what I saw no discernible difference in the attitudes and uh, the liberties afforded to you during the course of the 14 weeks. So at that point, you're, like you said, a combat infantryman. Then at my time, the process was to go to airborne school. So you'd go to the basic Army airborne course at Fort Benning, Georgia, um, and that is 3 weeks. And
Yeah.
um, there you pick up your wings, your basic parachutist wings. And from there, the process was you go to RIP for 4 weeks, and then after that, you go to your unit. I'll get more into the details, but this is where I'll say, in my opinion, the selection process really continues. So, again, on paper, that's what it took to get into the Ranger Regiment. After you get to your unit, um, you're usually at your unit for 6 months to a year before you earn the right to go to Ranger School. Ranger School. And of course, during that time, you have multiple, train ups, training deployments. At my time, a lot of combat deployments. You'd pick up at least one combat deployment in that time before you got the opportunity to go to Ranger School. You go to Ranger School. If you go straight through, it's 62 days. If you're um, if you're like me, you stick around a little bit longer. You stick around a little bit longer, and we'll get into that. You stick
Uh,
around a little bit longer, and once you graduate, you got your tab. And I think at that's the point in which I believe you've done that initial selection piece, and I'll explain further why. Um, so, uh, for me, leaving basic training and going into airborne school, um, you know, you're you're treated differently when you're in airborne school, much more relaxed. There are a lot of other services there. This is your first exposure to different ranks, folks from
right.
different services. You'll have folks in your, I think it's stick, right? Your stick, your
Yeah.
kind of group.
Yeah.
I had like an Air Force pilot captain. You'd have senior NCOs from non-infantry backgrounds. So it
You
was
have any SEALs?
no SEALs, no
Okay.
SEALs back then. The only we had some Marines, and from what I could gather and what I knew at the time, I my guess was they were reconnaissance of some
Yeah.
kind. I've come to learn that the Marines have a lot of reconnaissance
Yeah.
quote unquote reconnaissance units.
That's right.
So there's like I guess there's
Yeah.
the top of the heap, which is in with reconnaissance in their name. It was
Yes.
force reconnaissance at the
Force recon. Yeah.
time.
And they
But
have
the
company recon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then it breaks down. There's like
Mhm.
battalion and then other things. But then there are also things like and I'm not throwing shade here. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's one
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
those things you learn later, which is there's like radio reconnaissance
Oh yeah.
and there's light armored reconnaissance. So the Marines, I guess, like to
Yeah.
spread that reconnaissance word around.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they have MARSOC, which is a
Yeah.
whole, they're on a kind of a higher level. I mean, not higher, but yeah, the more specialized as special operators. But anyway.
Yeah, and later on in my career, I would interact with some folks when they were initially standing up. So, not
Yeah.
very interesting stories, but some stories associated with that. So at Airborne School, and of course, the purpose there and the way the Army thought of it at the time, and generally thinks about it, like Airborne was always a good way to sort of filter out folks
Hmm.
who who wouldn't be fit for the special operations mission in one way or another. It was just another way to sort of cull from the
Right.
group those folks who are willing to take it a step further than normal. Um, and that's like the general idea there. So, but Airborne School is easy. It's a cakewalk. It's crazy easy. It's very theatrical in the way that it's put on. And you went to Benning, right? For
Oh yeah.
Airborne School? Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
it is
Black hats.
the black hats, and they do like this clapping thing with the sides of their thighs, and it's very
Yeah.
hard to describe.
Yeah.
It's very hard to describe, and like a lot of like knife hand pointing at
Right.
things. But it on some level it does keep your interest, and I think that's the purpose, is to
Right.
try to keep you interested. In terms of airborne stories, I just remember the chow hall being pretty decent.
Yeah.
Especially coming after infantry basic training. Like you were like, okay, like no one's rushing me out of here. I can eat, like I can get cake.
Yeah.
I can get dessert. Okay, so the infantry folk, we were eating pretty well.
Mhm.
Um, so I remember that, and I remember during Tower Week, which this was the big like those yellow or orange,
Yeah.
like was it 250-foot tower? I think 250
Yeah.
foot tower.
They were way
Uh,
up there.
way up there. So I remember I did that. Not all classes do it, depending on winds and other weather factors, but we did it. And the one thing I remember from that is you only do it once,
Hmm.
I believe. I remember I went up, did the stuff, you go down, and when you're training, they always tell you don't reach for the ground.
Yeah.
And what they mean by that is don't stare at the ground and don't try to extend your legs in order to like the body's natural instinct is to extend your legs to the ground as you're
Right.
falling. When in reality, you want to keep your knees bent, feet and
Yeah.
knees together, you
Yeah.
know, you know,
Very much so.
feet knees together, relaxed. And I did the exact opposite. And they plow up the field, they
Hmm.
plow up the dirt around the 250-foot towers. So
Yeah.
it's pretty soft. It's relatively soft for a landing. I'd go on to land in concrete plenty of times on
Yeah.
airfields. So comparatively, it was extremely soft. But
Right.
I reached with my left foot, I believe. And when I came down, I came up and I was like, oh shit, I broke my foot. I was convinced that I'd broken my foot
On that Tam Tower where,
on the 250-foot tower. I
yeah.
said nothing. I said nothing to anybody. I tried to walk off as normal as possible. And if I remember correctly, that was literally like the last evolution before the weekend that would lead into jump week. So I was like, oh my
Oh
God.
man.
I was like, oh my God. I didn't say anything to anyone. I hobbled off trying to look as normal as possible. It's like, oh, okay. And then went into the weekend, and I don't remember how I tended to it. I'm pretty sure I did ice packs, I did like Motrin, I did all the normal stuff. I remember it was bothering me, but I wasn't going to tell anyone about it at that point. I didn't want to get recycled. I just wanted to keep moving forward. I could walk on it enough that I felt like, okay, I should be good to go. Um, Jump week, I don't really remember much about about jump week. All I remember is graduation, beautiful day. My father had gone to airborne school
Yeah.
back in the day. It's one of the only cool guy schools he got to do as an MP. So he was
Yeah.
there. He was there when I got my wings. He pinned my wings on me. It was pretty cool. But knowing that RIP was coming up the next week sort of made it, you know, you're elated. You hit the ground and you're elated. Oh man, I did 5 jumps. I'm a paratrooper now, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you're like, I'm a paratrooper, and you get in formation, but you're very quickly aware of this thing looming, this dark cloud looming in
Yeah.
front of you, and you're not really enjoying it.
Right. Right.
You kind of said it when you graduated buds. By no means is it the same thing, but it goes
Mhm.
back to that attitude of there's always something next.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you never really get to savor the accomplishment, is what
Hmm.
it felt like. It felt like
Yep.
there was always something else that was coming up. So so if I remember correctly, I got the weekend, and I know this because I did a very like boot thing, which was I was so proud. I was proud of myself for getting my wings. I went back home, which was the suburb of Atlanta, and I remember we went out to eat, enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, I'd pinned my parachute wings to this ball cap that I was wearing.
Yeah, of course. The big deal, man.
They were like, do you know? I can't even remember what type of hat it was. It might have been like a Braves hat. But I had a Braves hat, and then I pinned. Luckily, it wasn't the
Yeah.
shiny version, and I think this was like my justification. It was like the dull type of wings, right? You can
A
always get
lead
them dull.
sled.
Yeah, yeah. Like you
Yeah.
could get them like that, or you could get them shiny. And
Right.
these were like the matte finish, so it doesn't stick
Yeah.
out that much. So I pinned like the my parachute wings and my Braves hat. I'm going to the mall. I'm going to IHOP. I think we went to Joe's Crab Shack. Like you're going to all these, all you do is eat. All you do is eat. So
Right.
you go to eat, you go to movies, and then you sleep. That's like
Yep.
all you do on your breaks.
That's right.
So I remember that. So I had a good weekend. I get back, and then you're dreading it. You had heard stories. So everyone with at the time you needed Ranger contracts. I don't really remember people picking up Ranger along the way, although I think you could. So there might be folks who had gotten airborne but not a Ranger contract, and the airborne contract would have sent them to the 82nd, the
Yeah.
173rd Brigade in Italy, and there was another unit. I think it was pretty new at the time in Alaska.
Aren't the 101st? Aren't those guys? Maybe some of them are airborne. Oh, they're air cav,
Yeah, they're air assault.
air assault.
Air
Yeah.
assault is what we call them now. Air cav is what they
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
called when they first stood
Yeah.
up. So yeah, the 101st was an airborne, a parachute infantry division in World War II, even up through Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
Even they did combat jumps into Vietnam, and then sometime after that, they picked up the air assault mission instead. And air assault is air cavalry. It's basically the entire division operates more or less off of helicopters.
Right.
So that's a capability, and I think they're the only one in the world that's officially dedicated. Now saying that, like the 82nd could ride in on helicopters. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
not throwing shade, it just is what it is.
Right. Right.
Um, but the at the time, the 101st did have still had Pathfinder companies,
Uh-huh.
and those
Yeah.
Pathfinder
Yeah.
companies
Right.
were airborne units. So, and in Ranger School, I'd met with some folks who were from the Pathfinder company, and
Right.
that Pathfinder company had like a mini selection. But in the waning days of the Pathfinder company, it just became something you got assigned to. It kind of lost all of
Yeah.
its, all of its hooiness, if you
Yeah.
will. And then I think they disbanded them. So, but while I was in airborne school, I started to hear stories of what would happen when you went to RIP, when you went to the started the Ranger selection process. All the intel I had at the time, so the private rumor mill
Mm.
was okay. You're gonna get all your bags together, and what they do is they make you load your bags up onto a 5 ton, except for one bag, one duffel, and then they make you run behind the truck with your duffel up the street. So the Ranger Training Company, I think that they called it the Ranger Operations Company at the time, was within the Special Troops Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment, and they were in charge of the selection,
Right.
the RIP at the time, and that was, man, maybe it was like a mile up the road, mile, maybe more, maybe less, something like that, behind a brown fence.
Hmm.
So people would drive by and be like, "What's in there?" Like, "Oh, the Rangers are in there." Like, "Okay, drive faster, drive faster." So so that's what I was mentally prepared for. I was like, "Okay, when they come to pick us up, they're gonna like scream and yell, and we're gonna load this 5 ton, and then I need to be mentally prepared to carry my duffel up the." And of course, the rumor mill was like, "Okay, yeah, and if you fall out, like they don't even let you start; they'll kick you out right then and there."
Okay,
Um,
well, hold on a second.
Go ahead.
What about your broken foot? What, you got a freaking broken foot? I don't even know how you landed and did a full pair 5 jumps and like what the heck is going on with that?
I'll say that I thought my foot was when I landed and when I was hobbling off the tower, the tower area. I thought like, man, I'd broken it. I hadn't broken my foot before. I don't know what that felt like. whatever I did over the weekend got me to at least the point where I was like, I can work with it. I do vaguely. It did hurt for a while, um, but I don't think it was broken. It couldn't have been
Yeah.
broken. Now I'll tell you that to this day, I sometimes have trouble with that foot. So I'm not quite sure what I did. Maybe I just strained something. Maybe I did like a hairline fracture or something like that. But whatever it is, I just rolled with it. I iced it up that weekend, stayed off of it, stuffed my face with food, wore my parachute wings on my hat, and I just
Ate
rolled into it
Motrin
from
like
there.
candy.
Yeah, yeah, and I did in preparation for this boot run, holding on to for you sea bag, but duffel bag, D
Hmm.
bag, and a mile up the street.
How'd you
So,
go?
so the day came. It was. I feel like it was during the day. We definitely got the weekend. Oh, yeah, okay, so this is what was strange. So after you graduate on, like, a Friday, and you do have to check in with where you're handing off to, because most people are leaving the school at that point. They're going back to, whatever
Mm,
unit they came from or moving going on to their gaining unit. But
right.
for me, I you did have to check in with the ranger liaison. So, um, I had we checked in, and the guy, and then there was a ranger, and you're terrified. You're like, I don't know if I knew that we were going to get the weekend off, but I think I found out then information that we were getting the weekend off. So I went ahead. He signed us in, checked us off. He's like, all right, be back here Monday. He's very like nonchalant about it. He's like, all right, you got the weekend. Be back here on Monday. Blah blah blah. All your bags. Blah blah blah. Blah. So when the time came, there was a 5 ton and there was a bus. We loaded up our bags, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Here we go. And at the time, like, the guys picking us up, they got their pins and patches on. So they all got CIB, combat infantryman badges, and all kinds of stuff. And they're like E5s, E6s. And you're like, oh shit, dude, these guys are the real deal. These are real Rangers right here. And I'm so scared. And we're like, and then they're like, all right, get on the bus. They're like, I'm like, okay. So we get on the bus, and we're like, okay, they're gonna yell and scream. They're gonna tell us to get off the bus any second now. Um, and and I remember, and it's just a mile up the road, but this is like the first like mind game. So we stayed on the bus. They drove us up there. So we're like, oh my god, what's going on? But the whole time you're so tense because you were
Yeah.
expecting one thing and now something else was happening. They were blaring pop music at like the loudest it could go on the bus. Like, we're all sitting there scared out of our minds. Like, we're all probably got like, like saucer dishes for eyes, and like they're blaring pop music, and you're just so confused what's going on. Um, they pulled us up there, and then they started to in process us. Um, I don't remember I don't remember exactly what it was like when we in processed. I mean, to be quite honest, there's a lot of rip I don't remember because other things would go on to overshadow those
Mm,
experiences. There are key moments in rip that I can remember.
yeah.
And rip at the time was, again, 4 weeks. It had traditionally been 3 weeks. Um, and it included classroom time. In terms of things you had to pass, there was always like an initial PT test, um, physical training along the way. There was rappel tower training. There was RFR, Ranger First Responder, or like first aid training.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fourth week they added on was for marksmanship training, and that was new. So, because what was happening was guys were leaving RIP and going right into like deploying right away, which I would end up doing. So they were like, let's get these guys at least another week of marksmanship training with Rangers who can kind of, when they get to their company, they'll do things differently, but at least they'll be a little bit closer to being prepared to how the Rangers do it. So they added that fourth week. We have, at RIP, we had our own, I wouldn't quite say hell week
Mm,
type event, but they call it Cole Range, COLE Range, which is like this kind of like you described San Clemente Island. It's
mhm.
like this little ranger area back in the deep in the woods, the training areas in Fort Benning, where you're just left alone. where you're just left
Right.
alone with the cadre. And sort of the big thing there is land nav, and then just them just
Right.
beating up on you.
No, what, so when I was talking about buds, I think I said something to the effect of the hardest single thing. I mean, there's lots of hard things, but was the dealing with cold water. That's what sorted out the men from the boys in buds. What about Ranger? I've heard hunger, I've heard exhaustion, but I'd like to hear it from you. Hardest
At
thing.
at RIP, food is not a problem at RIP. You get 3 meals a day, you're good.
Yeah.
In terms of exhaustion, um, though you only spend like it's like one of the it's like this at the time I think it was like the second week you spend a week out there, so it's like 4 or 5 days. I don't think you slept much then, um, but during the rest of the course it wasn't a problem.
Hmm.
In terms of cold water, I graduated in May of 06, oh 05 or oh 06, May of 06. So, at that time, like in terms of like the temperature, the weather was normally good. It wasn't too rainy or washed out or anything like that. But it is that time of the year in Fort Benning where the nights are cold, and it's
Hmm.
that humid cold. So it's like that cutting cold. And then the days were searing. So,
Yeah.
you'd be out on a blacktop getting smoked, doing exercises for hours. And you're like, you know, like, of course, it's the day, it's brutal out here and it's hot, and then you're sweating, and then as night falls,
Huh.
as night falls and you're sweating, now it's chill cooling off and it's getting cold. Um, uh, yeah, so food not a problem. No, that wasn't really a problem. It was really plenty of exercising, right, is what they were
Hmm.
doing. Um, It was really just to stick around. I don't remember people quit, people left, but it's not a big show like it seems to be at Buds, right?
Yeah.
It's just people just kind of disappear. Um, People just kind of disappear, and they look for opportunities to they're looking for opportunities to get people to quit. They're saying, hey, we're not going to stop this until
Right.
somebody quits. Or out at coal range, you'd be cold, you'd be huddled together, or you'd be hitting the wood line. That's kind of like the classic like ranger punishment. So if you
What
all
is it?
if
What
for
is hitting the wood line?
so if for you all, like, what did you call it, like hit the
Hit the
surf or something?
surf. Yeah.
Hit the
Surf.
surf is you go and you run in the water and you get wet and sandy, right? That's what
Yeah.
you were
Wet and
saying.
sandy.
So for hitting the wood for hitting the wood line, Coal Range is the facility is like it's this dirt road and then it's this huge clearing. It's this big ass clearing in the middle of the woods. And there's this far wood line
Oh,
from where you set it you sort of set up you dress your rucksacks,
right.
right? and
Right.
and and the instructors like hooch, and like there was like a burn pit area for quitters, and like there was like so you got all that set up, but far and I don't even know the distance, but far away there's like the edge of the wood line. So the common thing that happens is like, all right, like randomly, or if you're screwing up, go hit the wood line. And then
Right.
we would have to sometimes it would be an all out sprint there and back. You'd
Right.
have to run into the wood line and grab a stick, proof that you made it to the wood line.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Sure.
and you're like, oh well, wouldn't there be sticks in the middle?
Yeah.
No, no, trust me. Every RIP class before you had picked it clean. There were no
Yeah.
sticks in the middle of the field, so you had to
Gotcha.
get into the. And not only did you have to get in the wood line, but like depending on the time of year, like again, it
Yeah.
gets picked clean from all
You
the
might
guys
have to
that
run
were.
far into the wood line.
Yeah, you'd have to get into the wood line to get a stick to prove that you went into the wood line. And sometimes it was a sprint there and back. And like, and they would, of course, they would time you. You definitely don't want to be some of the last people there. Sometimes you'd bear crawl, and that was brutal. Bear crawling
Oh yeah.
that distance,
Yeah.
and it's an open field. They're like divots, and they're all kind of like bear crawling like that. It's
That
terrible.
sucks. Yeah.
So you do that, and there are some nights where all night long you're sprinting back and forth, you're bear crawling this stuff, and like from the instructor's point of view, all I see is like these headlamps, headlamps like bobbing and going back, and it was the easy button for them. Don't know what to do. You want to
Yeah.
terrorize these kids. hit the wood line,
Hit the wood
right?
line. Yep. But any downtime, guess what?
Hit the
Hey,
wood line.
one other thing too. You mentioned for our non-ranger
Hmm.
listeners
Hmm.
and maybe non-military listeners, you talked about dressing rucks. Now, listen, I remember when I went to SODIC, that's a sniper course, that's a special forces sniper course, and there were 5 or 6 or 7 rangers there. And I remember the one thing I just triggered my memory. They had their rucks like dressed up. Man, they looked perfect. And the special forces guys didn't do it. The SEALs, are you kidding? We didn't even have rucks. But those rangers had rucks looking perfect. Like,
Uh-huh.
what? Tell us about dressing a ruck. Just
Yeah. So I mean, the Ranger Regiment, like it's in the name, it's a very regimented place, and the farther you go back, the more regimented it was. I say dress right, dress, so folks in the military know that that's like when you're forming up into like your little formations, right?
yeah,
Like you're getting it. You're not just supposed to be a gaggle. You're supposed to be in line and
yeah,
spaced out appropriately and all that type of stuff. So everywhere, again at my time, everywhere, and I hope to some extent it still continues on some level at least. But if you're a platoon, a formation going somewhere and you stop, like you're going to put your ruck, so your ruck is like your big bag of equipment, like you carry on a big
mhm,
backpack basically. You're gonna take it, you're gonna like put it down in formation just like how you're standing. It's gonna
yeah,
be nice and clean. You're gonna tuck in your straps,
yep,
right? You're not gonna have things open. um, uh, Going a step further, to some extent, how the stuff is packed in your bag is not up to you. Some things need to be in standard places. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so like your poncho liner, like the poncho liner, if I remember correctly, my instinct tells me that your poncho liner needs to be in in the Alice pack, needs to be that first
mhm,
big pocket on the outside, right in the middle. That's where you put your poncho liner, and everyone would have their poncho liners in the same place, right? And so
yeah,
that's very much old school rangering, but something that carried on to that time and then before. So, when you put your equipment down, you put it down there just like that. And then it would even go so far as to, like, so let's say you had like your webbing, your webbing, like your H harness or whatever we carried at the time. I don't remember.
yeah,
Or your flick and your weapon, you'd even put that on your kit
yeah.
in a
That's right.
certain way. So it'd be like rucksack down, all the straps stowed away, tucked
Yeah,
under. You'd put like your webbing, your equipment down in a certain way. You put your rifle on the top part of it, pointed this way, with a magazine well pointing to the left, and everyone would be dressed right. Dress would look the
yeah.
same.
That's I don't know how's our time looking. I dig into that a little bit. Not
Let The answer is I don't know because I didn't start the timer, and for whatever reason, this thing doesn't tell you how long you've been going. We might be getting close, and we can. I mean, we have the luxury of milking these episodes for as many as we want.
well.
So
If I'm right, we're at about 33 minutes because
okay,
I looked at my screen.
so if you
But
got yeah, if you got questions, let's pause it here and let's
yeah,
pick it back up in the next one. We'll start with
yeah,
why
we'll
are
start with my
Rangers? Why are you the way you are?
yeah, because this is interesting cultural stuff, man. I could write a book on this. Anyway, all right.
Okay, so we'll pause there. Um, Thanks for listening. We'll get you through the rest of Ranger training here coming up, and we'll pick back up with why Rangers are the way they are. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.
See you.